If Mark Zuckerberg had to start over today with $0 and build his way to $100,000 in 2026, he wouldn't build another Facebook. The landscape has changed entirely. The opportunities that existed in 2004 when he launched Facebook from his Harvard dorm room are fundamentally different from what's available now. But here's what makes studying Zuckerberg's approach so valuable. His principles for identifying opportunities, building products, and scaling businesses remain remarkably consistent and applicable regardless of the era. Drawing from his interviews over 2 decades, his writings, his congressional testimonies, his podcast appearances, and the documented history of Facebook's early days, we can construct a detailed roadmap of exactly how Zuckerberg would approach building wealth from scratch in today's environment. Zuckerberg has always been obsessed with one core question: what do people want that they don't have yet? Not what do people say they want, but what do their behaviors reveal about their unmet needs? This distinction is critical. When he built Facebook, college students weren't asking for a social network. They were creating physical Facebook books. They were checking each other out on campus. They were trying to figure out who was in their classes and who was dating whom. Zuckerberg saw the behavior and built the solution. So step 1 in his approach to building from $0 to $100,000 in 2026 would be identifying a behavioral gap in the market, something people are already trying to do but doing inefficiently or painfully. In 2026, Zuckerberg would look at 3 major technological shifts happening right now. First, artificial intelligence has become accessible to individual builders in ways that were impossible even 2 years ago. Second, the creator economy has matured beyond YouTube and Instagram into something more sophisticated and fragmented. Third, remote work and digital collaboration have created entirely new categories of problems that didn't exist before 2020. Unlike his approach in 2004 when he could build a social network with just PHP and MySQL, today he recognized that the barrier to entry for technology has dropped so low that the competitive advantage isn't in building the technology itself, it's in understanding human behavior and distribution better than anyone else. Step 1 in Zuckerberg's playbook would be spending the first 30 days doing nothing but observation and conversation. This might sound counterintuitive when you're restarting from $0 and want to hit $100,000 as quickly as possible, but Zuckerberg has repeatedly emphasized in interviews that his biggest advantage at Harvard wasn't his coding skills, it was that he was living among his users. He understood college students because he was one. He saw their frustrations firsthand. So in 2026, he'd embed himself in a community where money is changing hands, where people have problems they're willing to pay to solve, and where he could observe behavior patterns that reveal opportunities. The specific community he'd choose would likely be small business owners who are undergoing digital transformation. Why this group? Because Zuckerberg has always been drawn to helping underdogs compete against larger, better-resourced competitors. Facebook was initially about giving individual college students a voice and presence. Later, Facebook's advertising platform was explicitly designed to let small businesses compete with major brands. In 2026, small business owners are drowning in tools. They have Shopify for e-commerce, QuickBooks for accounting, MailChimp for email, Instagram for social media, Google for ads, Zoom for meetings, Slack for team communication, Calendly for scheduling, and 50 other applications that don't talk to each other. They're spending hours each day switching between tabs, copying information from one system to another, and trying to get a coherent picture of their business. This is exactly the kind of fragmented, painful experience that Zuckerberg would recognize as an opportunity. During these first 30 days, he wouldn't be trying to sell anything. He'd be having coffee with small business owners, asking them to walk him through their daily routines, watching how they actually work rather than how they say they work. He'd be looking for the moments of friction, the tasks they complain about, the workarounds they've created. Zuckerberg did this at Harvard by literally watching how students used the original Harvard Facebook book, how they talked about people they met at parties, how they tried to figure out social dynamics. He'd applied the same ethnographic approach to small businesses in 2020. By the end of 30 days, Zuckerberg would have identified a specific painful workflow that multiple business owners struggle with. Let's say, based on his observations, he discovers that small e-commerce businesses waste enormous amounts of time on customer service, inquiries that are repetitive and predictable. Questions like, where is my order? What's your return policy? Do you ship to Canada? What sizes do you have available? These businesses are too small to hire full-time customer service staff. But answering these messages on Instagram, Facebook, email, and SMS is consuming hours every single day. The existing solutions, Chatbots built on platforms like ManyChat or ChatFuel require technical setup, don't understand context well, and feel robotic to customers. This is the opportunity. Step 2 in Zuckerberg's approach would be building the absolute minimum viable product that solves this specific problem, and he'd give himself exactly 2 weeks to do it. Not 2 months, 2 weeks. This urgency is crucial. In interviews, Zuckerberg has talked about how the original Facebook was built in a matter of weeks, not because he was rushing, but because he was focused on solving one problem really well. In 2026, with AI tools available, he could build a customer service agent that actually works in 2 weeks. He'd use existing large language models through APIs, he'd build a simple interface that connects to Instagram and Facebook messages, and he'd create a training process where the business owner feeds the AI information about their products, policies, and brand voice. The entire thing would be held together with duct tape and prayers, but it would work for the one problem he identified. Here's where Zuckerberg's approach differs from most entrepreneurs. He wouldn't spend these 2 weeks perfecting the product. He'd spend maybe 8 days building a functional prototype and 6 days getting it into the hands of real users. Those 10 business owners he met during his first 30 days. He'd go back to them and offer them free access in exchange for feedback. Not feedback in a week, feedback while they're using it. He'd sit in their offices or on Zoom calls and watch them set it up, watch them interact with it, watch where they get confused or frustrated. This real-time user testing was how Facebook evolved in its early days. Zuckerberg would launch features in the evening and watch how students used them overnight, then iterate the next day based on what he observed. The feedback from these initial 10 users would be brutal. The interface would be confusing. The AI would give weird responses sometimes. The setup process would be too technical. But among all that feedback, there would be golden insights. Maybe one business owner would say something like, "This is amazing for basic questions, but I wish it could handle refund requests." Another might say, "I love this, but I need it to work on email too, not just social media." A third might say, "The responses are too formal. My brand is more casual and friendly." Each of these pieces of feedback represents either a feature to add or a positioning to refine. Zuckerberg has always been ruthless about prioritizing feedback. In Facebook's early days, he ignored feature requests that didn't align with his core vision but jumped on anything that made the core experience better. Step 3 would be converting these free users into paying customers. This would happen around day 45. Zuckerberg wouldn't overthink pricing. He'd simply ask each business owner, how many hours per week is this saving you, and what's your time worth per hour? If a business owner says it is saving them 5 hours per week and their time is worth $50 per hour, that's $250 per week, or roughly $1,000 per month in value. He'd price the service at $99 per month, not $100.99. The psychological difference matters. This pricing wouldn't be based on complicated calculations of customer acquisition cost or lifetime value. It would be based on a simple principle Zuckerberg learned early: charge enough that people take it seriously, but not so much that it becomes a difficult decision. $99 per month for a small business owner who is saving 5 hours per week is a no-brainer. Out of the 10 free users, maybe 7 would convert to paying customers. That's $693 per month in recurring revenue by day 45. This might not sound like a path to $100,000, but here's where the math gets interesting. $693 per month is $8,316 per year. To hit $100,000 in the first year, he'd need to get to about $8,300 per month in recurring revenue. Starting from $693 per month, he'd need to roughly 12 times his customer base over the next 10 months. That's completely achievable with the right growth strategy. Step 4 is where Zuckerberg's understanding of distribution becomes critical. Most entrepreneurs at this stage would start thinking about building a website, creating content, running ads, all the traditional marketing playbook. Zuckerberg would do something different. He'd focus entirely on building features that create viral growth. When he built Facebook, every feature was designed with virality in mind. The newsfeed wasn't just a way to see updates, it was a way to see what your friends were doing, which made you want to be on Facebook so your friends could see what you were doing. Photo tagging wasn't just organization. It was a way to pull people into the platform by notifying them they'd been tagged. Zuckerberg understood that the best distribution is built into the product itself. For his customer service AI product, he'd add a feature that creates viral growth. Here's what that might look like. Every time the AI successfully handles a customer inquiry, it would end the conversation with a small branded message. This conversation was handled by Smart Support AI. Want to save time on customer service? Learn more. The customer who just had their question answered would see this message, and some percentage of those customers are themselves business owners or no business owners. But Zuckerberg wouldn't stop there. He'd add a referral program for his existing customers. Any business owner who refers another business owner would get 1 month free for each successful referral. This creates a compounding growth loop. Happy customers naturally want to tell other business owners about something that's saving them 5 hours per week, and now they have a financial incentive to do so. But here's the key insight that separates Zuckerberg's thinking from typical referral programs. He wouldn't launch the referral program to all customers at once. He'd start with the 3 customers who seem most enthusiastic, the ones who've already been voluntarily telling people about the product. He'd ask them directly, "Hey, I noticed you mentioned you told another business owner about this. Would you be interested in getting a free month for referrals?" When they say yes, he'd give them a custom referral link and track what happens. Do they actually refer anyone? Do those referrals convert? What messaging do they use when they refer someone? This small-scale test would give him data on whether the referral program actually works before rolling it out widely. This test-and-learn approach is fundamental to how Facebook operated in its growth phase. They'd test features on Stanford before rolling them to other schools. They'd test advertising formats on small segments before going wide. By day 90, with 7 paying customers growing through word of mouth and a basic referral program starting to kick in, Zuckerberg would likely be at around 12 to 15 customers, bringing in about $1,200 per month in recurring revenue. This is the point where most entrepreneurs start to feel the anxiety of slow growth. $1,200 per month, is UNK going to get to $100,000 fast enough? This is exactly when Zuckerberg's long-term thinking becomes crucial. In interviews, he's talked about how Facebook could have monetized much earlier than it did. They could have sold ads in 2005 or 2006. But Zuckerberg understood that premature monetization would slow down growth, and growth was more valuable than early revenue. The same principle applies here, but inverted. He's already monetizing from day one at $99 per month, so the question isn't when to monetize, but when to scale. Step 5 would be his first real investment in growth, and it wouldn't be in advertising. It would be in content, but not content marketing in the traditional sense. Zuckerberg would create a weekly video series where he interviews his own customers about how they're reusing the product and what results they're getting. Each video would be 15 to 20 minutes long, published on YouTube, LinkedIn, and as a podcast. The genius of this approach is that it serves multiple purposes simultaneously. First, it creates social proof. Potential customers see real business owners talking about real results. Second, it strengthens relationships with existing customers. Being featured in a video makes them feel valued and more likely to stay long-term and refer others. Third, it generates searchable content. When someone searches how to handle customer service for small e-commerce business, these videos could rank. Fourth, it forces Zuckerberg to stay deeply connected to how customers are actually using the product, which informs product development. He'd produced the first 4 episodes himself with nothing more than Zoom and basic editing software. Total time investment, maybe 3 hours per episode including prep, recording, and editing. 12 hours total for a month's worth of content. The guests would be his own customers who are already happy to participate. 0 budget required. This is exactly how Zuckerberg operated in Facebook's early days. They didn't have a marketing budget. They had a product that people wanted to talk about, and they created mechanisms for those conversations to spread. The video series would be that mechanism. The first episode might feature a customer who runs a sustainable fashion brand talking about how the AI handles questions about materials and manufacturing while maintaining the brand's eco-conscious voice. The second episode could feature a handmade jewelry maker discussing how the AI manages custom order inquiries. The third might be a pet supplies business owner explaining how the AI reduced their response time from 4 hours to 4 minutes. Each episode would include specific numbers, savings in time and money, and would feel more like a documentary than an advertisement. This authenticity is what makes it shareable and credible. By day 120, these videos would start generating inbound leads, maybe not hundreds, but a steady trickle. 5 to 10 business owners per week would reach out after watching an episode. Zuckerberg would personally handle every single one of these conversations, not because he has to, but because each conversation is a learning opportunity. What made them reach out? Which episode resonated? What specific problem are they trying to solve? Are they exactly like his existing customers, or are they different? This information compounds over time into an incredibly deep understanding of his market. Facebook's early success was partly because Zuckerberg and his small team personally understood their users better than any competitor could. They were responding to user feedback, but more importantly, they were anticipating what users would want next. During this phase, from day 90 to day 180, the focus would be entirely on sustainable, compounding growth, converting inbound leads from content, optimizing the referral program based on data about what's working, and gradually improving the product based on user feedback. By day 180, with the compound effects of word of mouth, referrals, and content starting to work together, Zuckerberg would likely have somewhere around 40 to 50 customers. That's $4,000 to $5,000 per month in recurring revenue, which annualizes to about $50,000, halfway to the $100,000 goal in terms of annual run rate, with 6 months left to go. Step 6 is where Zuckerberg would make a critical decision that most entrepreneurs get wrong. This is the moment when many founders would think, I need to scale up, hire salespeople, invest in paid advertising, accelerate growth. Zuckerberg would do the opposite. He'd slow down and focus on retention. Why? Because he'd recognize that with 40 to 50 customers, he has enough data to see patterns in who stays and who churns. If customers are leaving after 2 or 3 months, no amount of new customer acquisition will get him to sustainable $100,000. But if customers are staying for a year or more, then every new customer compounds on top of the previous ones, and the math becomes exponential rather than linear. He'd spend 2 weeks doing nothing but analyzing his customer data. Who are the customers still around from day 45? What do they have in common? Are they in similar industries? Similar revenue sizes? Do they have similar personalities or communication styles? And critically, who are the customers who left? When did they leave and why? He'd reach out to every single churned customer and ask for a completely honest conversation about why they stopped using the product. Not a survey, a real phone call or video chat. This obsession with understanding churn is directly from Facebook's playbook. When growth started slowing in different markets, Zuckerberg's teams would dive deep into cohort analysis and user interviews to understand why people were leaving or not engaging. They'd discover issues like the product being too complicated for older users, or too slow on certain types of phones, or not having features that mattered in specific countries. Each discovery led to specific fixes that improved retention. Let's say through this analysis, Zuckerberg discovers that customers in the handmade goods category, jewelry makers, artisans, custom furniture builders, have perfect retention. None of them have churned. They're all actively using the product daily. Meanwhile, customers in commodity product categories, people selling mass-manufactured items available everywhere, have much higher churn. They stay for a month or two then leave. The insight here is clear. The product works exceptionally well when answering questions requires understanding the unique story behind each product, but it's less valuable when the questions are generic and the answers are commoditized. This insight would completely change the strategy going forward. Step 7 would be doubling down on the niche that works. Instead of trying to serve all small e-commerce businesses, Zuckerberg would reposition entirely around artisan and handmade businesses. The messaging would change from customer service AI for e-commerce to customer service AI for makers and artisans who want to share their story at scale. This feels risky. The market size just got smaller, but Zuckerberg has always understood that dominating a small niche is more valuable than being mediocre in a large market. Facebook started as a network exclusively for Harvard students. It wasn't until they dominated Harvard that they expanded to other Ivy League schools, then to all colleges, then to high schools, and eventually to everyone. This sequencing was deliberate. Dominate the niche, then expand. Don't try to be everything to everyone from day one. With this new positioning focused on makers and artisans, everything changes. The content strategy becomes more specific. Instead of interviewing generic e-commerce businesses, every video features an artisan talking about their craft and how the AI helps them scale their customer relationships without losing their personal touch. The product features start catering specifically to this audience. Maybe he adds a feature that lets artisans easily share the story behind each product when customers ask questions. Maybe he integrates with Etsy since that's where many artisans sell. Maybe he creates templates specifically for common artisan scenarios like custom orders, personalization requests, and shipping for delicate handmade items. This repositioning would attract attention from communities of makers, Facebook groups for artisans, subreddits for people who sell handmade goods, artisan podcasts and newsletters. Zuckerberg would reach out to the leaders of these communities, not to advertise, but to offer value. He'd offered to give free workshops on customer service best practices for artisans. He'd create free tools and resources that help artisans even if they never become customers. This is the same community building approach he used at Harvard. He didn't launch Facebook by buying ads. He launched it by making something useful for a specific community and becoming part of that community himself. By day 248 months in, this focused strategy would be paying off. Growth rate would accelerate because the product market fit is much stronger in this specific niche. Instead of converting 20% of inbound leads, he might be converting 50 or 60% because the leads are all from his specific target market. Instead of customers staying for 3 months on average, they might stay for years because the product genuinely solves a painful problem for this specific group. The customer count might be at 80 to 100 customers by this point, generating $8,000 to $10,000 per month in recurring revenue. That's $96,000 to $120,000 annualized. The goal is essentially reached in terms of run rate, but Zuckerberg wouldn't stop there. Step 8 would be about solidifying the business foundation to ensure that $100,000 is sustainable and can grow from there. He'd focus on 3 things simultaneously: automating himself out of customer acquisition, building moats around his product, and creating financial sustainability. Let's break down each of these. Automating customer acquisition means setting up systems that bring in new customers without his direct involvement. Up to this point, Zuckerberg has been personally doing customer interviews for content, personally responding to every inbound lead, personally onboarding every customer. That doesn't scale. He'd start by documenting his entire sales process. What questions does he ask prospects? How does he demonstrate value? What objections come up and how does he handle them? Then he'd turn this documented process into automated sequences. Email sequences that nurture leads who aren't ready to buy immediately. Video tutorials that answer common questions so he doesn't have to answer them live. A self-service onboarding process that walks new customers through setup step by step. The goal isn't to remove the human touch entirely, but to make his involvement the exception rather than the rule. He'd only personally get involved when a lead is unusually complex or when a customer needs help with something that hasn't been documented yet. Building moats means making the product harder for competitors to replicate. In the AI space in 2026, building moats isn't about having better AI technology because everyone has access to similar models. It's about data, integrations, and switching costs. Zuckerberg would focus on all 3. Data moats come from each customer's usage, making the product better for them specifically. Every time a customer trains the AI on their products, policies, and brand voice, the AI gets better at representing that specific business. This creates a situation where switching to a competitor would mean starting over with training. Integration moats come from connecting deeply with the tools artisans already use. If the product integrates with Etsy, Shopify, Instagram, Facebook, and email, and if it syncs customer histories across all these channels, then switching to a competitor means losing all that integration convenience. Switching costs come from the value of historical data. After 6 months of customer interactions handled by the AI, that business has a valuable data set about what questions customers ask, what products they're interested in, what objections come up. Losing that data by switching products is painful. Creating financial sustainability means making sure the business can continue operating even if new customer acquisition temporarily stalls. With 100 customers at $99 per month, the business is generating about $10,000 per month in revenue. Zuckerberg would keep his personal expenses minimal. Unlike in 2004 when he was living in a college dorm with minimal expenses, in 2026 he'd be more intentional about lifestyle costs. He'd aim to take only $3,000 per month out of the business for living expenses. The other $7,000 per month would go toward 3 things: investing back in product development, building a cash reserve for stability, and experimenting with growth strategies that might not work. This financial discipline is something Zuckerberg has talked about in the context of Facebook's early days. They raised venture capital relatively late compared to other startups of that era because they were careful with money and reached profitability before most competitors. Step 9 would be leveraging his initial success to compound growth through partnerships and press. At this stage, with 100 customers, real revenue, and strong retention metrics, Zuckerberg has a compelling story. He's not just someone with an idea, he's someone who's built something people are paying for and loving. This credibility opens doors. He'd identify 3 types of partnerships that could accelerate growth. First, partnerships with tools that artisans already use: Etsy, Shopify, Square. He'd reach out to their partner programs and API teams with data showing how his customers who use these platforms get value. The goal would be to become a recommended integration or even get featured in their partner directories. Second, partnerships with communities and influencers in the artisan space. Podcasts about running handmade businesses, YouTube channels about craft entrepreneurship, newsletters for Etsy sellers. He'd offer to provide value to their audiences through workshops, guest appearances, or even free trials for their community members. Third, partnerships with complementary service providers, accountants who specialize in small creative businesses, business coaches for artisans, fulfillment companies that handle handmade goods. These service providers are always looking for tools to recommend to their clients, and a good recommendation from a trusted advisor is more valuable than any advertisement. Simultaneously, he'd start pursuing press coverage, but not traditional tech press. He wouldn't pitch TechCrunch or VentureBeat. Instead, he'd pitch publications that cover small business, e-commerce trends, and the artisan economy. Publications like Inc., Fast Company, Entrepreneur, and industry-specific magazines about crafts and handmade goods. The pitch wouldn't be "I built an AI tool." It would be "Here's how artisans are using AI to scale their businesses without losing their personal touch." The story is about his customers, not about him or his product. Journalists love stories about how technology is empowering underdogs, and he has real examples with real results. By day 300, 10 months in, these partnerships and press would create a second wave of growth. The first wave was content and word of mouth within the artisan community. This second wave is broader exposure and legitimization from being featured in publications and recommended by established platforms. Customer count could be at 150 to 200 by this point, generating $15,000 to $20,000 per month. That's $180,000 to $240,000 annualized, well past the original $100,000 goal. But hitting the goal isn't the same as building something sustainable. Step 10 would be about transitioning from founder-led growth to systematic growth. Up to this point, growth has largely come from Zuckerberg's personal efforts, his content, his customer conversations, his partnership outreach. For the business to scale beyond him, these activities need to become systematic. He'd hire his first employee, but not a salesperson or a marketer. He'd hire an operations person whose job is to systematize everything he's been doing manually. This person would take over customer onboarding, handle routine customer support, manage the content production schedule, and track all the growth metrics in a dashboard. This hire might cost $4,000 per month, a significant chunk of revenue, but it frees Zuckerberg to focus on the highest leverage activities: product development, strategic partnerships, and fundraising if that becomes relevant. With systems in place and someone else handling operations, Zuckerberg would focus on product expansion, but in a very specific way. He wouldn't add features that appeal to new customer segments. Instead, he'd add features that increase the value for existing customers, which increases retention and allows for price increases. Maybe he adds features that help artisans not just answer customer service inquiries, but actually convert those inquiries into sales. Maybe he adds analytics that show artisans which products generate the most questions, which questions lead to sales, and how to optimize their product descriptions based on common customer questions. Each of these features makes the product more valuable to existing customers, which justifies increasing the price from $99 to $149 per month. A $50 per month increase across 150 customers is an additional $7,500 per month in revenue with no additional customer acquisition required. Step 11 would be creating leverage through content that works while he sleeps. All the content up to this point has required Zuckerberg's active involvement, recording videos, doing interviews, writing emails. Now he'd create evergreen content that compounds over time. A comprehensive guide to customer service for artisan businesses, published as both a blog post series and a free downloadable PDF. A YouTube series of short tutorials on common customer service scenarios for makers, designed to rank in search results. A podcast where he interviews not just his customers but other people in the artisan business ecosystem, successful Etsy sellers, craft fair organizers, artisan business coaches, supply providers. Each piece of content would be designed to remain relevant for months or years, to rank in search engines, and to position him as the go-to expert on scaling artisan businesses. This content strategy would be paired with a sophisticated email nurture sequence. Anyone who downloads the free guide or watches certain videos would be added to an email list. Over the next 3 months, They'd receive a series of emails that educate them about customer service best practices, share stories from successful artisans, and gradually introduce his product as the solution. The key is that this is a long-term nurture, not an immediate sales pitch. Zuckerberg has always understood that not everyone is ready to buy on day one. Facebook's growth was partly about getting people to sign up even if they were unactive users immediately, then gradually pulling them in through notifications and social dynamics until they became engaged users. The same principle applies to B2B sales. Get people into your ecosystem, provide value, build trust, and convert them when they're ready. By day 365, the end of the first year, Zuckerberg would have built a business generating $25,000 to $30,000 per month in recurring revenue, which is $300,000 to $360,000 annualized. This is 3 to 3.6 times the original $100,000 goal. More importantly, he'd have built a business with real moats, systematic growth, strong retention, a specific niche, and a clear path to scale to 1 million and beyond. The business wouldn't be dependent on him personally anymore because systems and processes are in place. The product would be genuinely valuable to customers, evidenced by retention rates and willingness to pay. The market position would be defensible because of integrations, data advantages, and community relationships. Throughout this entire journey, several principles from Zuckerberg's approach would be evident in every decision. First, focus on solving real problems that people are actually experiencing, not problems you think they should have. Second, build for a specific niche and dominate it before expanding. Third, prioritize retention and product quality over growth at all costs. Fourth, create viral loops and word-of-mouth growth built into the product itself. Fifth, be obsessed with understanding user behavior through direct observation and conversation. Sixth, move fast and test ideas quickly rather than planning forever. Seventh, build moats through data, integrations, and switching costs rather than just better features. Eighth, invest in content and community rather than paid advertising in the early stages. Ninth, be financially disciplined and aim for sustainability, not just growth. 10th, systematize and document everything so growth doesn't depend on you personally. This is not a theoretical framework. This is exactly how Facebook was built in its early years and how Zuckerberg has described his approach to building products in dozens of interviews and writings over 20 years. The specific tactics have evolved with technology, but the principles remain constant. In 2026, with AI tools accessible with distribution channels like YouTube and LinkedIn available to anyone, with the ability to build and deploy software faster than ever before, these principles are actually more powerful than they were in 2004. The barrier to entry is lower, but the importance of understanding human behavior and building genuine value is higher. The question now becomes, what happens after you've hit $100,000? Most entrepreneurs would celebrate and coast. Zuckerberg would see this as the beginning, not the destination. The first $100,000 proves you've built something valuable. The next phase is about turning that valuable thing into something transformational. This is where the principles become more nuanced and where understanding Zuckerberg's long-term thinking becomes essential. Step 12 would be about making a critical strategic decision that will determine the trajectory of the business for years to come. At this point, with $300,000 in annual recurring revenue, strong retention, and systematic growth, Zuckerberg would have 3 paths available. Path 1. Optimize the existing business for profitability and lifestyle. Keep it at this scale, take out most of the revenue as personal income, and enjoy the freedom of a profitable small business. Path 2. Bootstrap growth by reinvesting all profits back into the business. Growing slowly but maintaining full control and ownership. Path 3. Raise outside capital to accelerate growth dramatically, aiming to build a much larger company but giving up some ownership and control. Each path is valid, but they lead to completely different outcomes. Zuckerberg has been very clear throughout his career about which path he'd choose. He'd choose path 3, raising capital to grow faster, but only if certain conditions are met. The conditions matter more than the capital itself. First condition, the business needs to have proven unit economics, meaning each customer generates more value over their lifetime than it costs to acquire them. With strong retention and word-of-mouth growth, this condition would likely be met. Second condition, there needs to be a clear path to building something much larger than a lifestyle business, a path to fundamentally changing how an entire industry works. This is where the earlier decision to focus on artisans becomes crucial. Is there a path to becoming the operating system for all artisan businesses globally? Could this customer service AI expand to handle inventory management, order processing, marketing, Analytics. Everything an artisan business needs. If yes, then raising capital makes sense. If no, if the opportunity is fundamentally limited to customer service for a niche market, then bootstrapping might be the better path. Let's assume Zuckerberg sees the bigger vision. The customer service AI is just the wedge, the first product that gets artisan businesses to trust him and integrate his software into their daily workflow. Once he has that integration and trust, he can expand to solve more of their problems. This is exactly how Facebook evolved. It started as a way to look up classmates, but Zuckerberg saw the potential for it to become the comprehensive social infrastructure of the internet. The profile pages, the photos, the events, the groups, the messaging, the marketplace. All of these came later once the initial product had established trust and daily usage. With this vision in mind, step 13 would be preparing to raise capital in a way that maximizes leverage and minimizes dilution. Zuckerberg famously maintained control of Facebook through its growth and even through going public, which is extremely unusual. He did this through a combination of careful investor selection, negotiating strong terms, and having metrics that gave him negotiating power. In 2026, preparing to raise capital would start with getting three things perfect: the growth metrics, the pitch narrative, and the investor target list. The growth metrics need to tell a compelling story. Investors don't just look at revenue, they look at growth rate, retention, customer acquisition cost, lifetime value, gross margins, and market size. Zuckerberg would spend a month before approaching any investors making sure these metrics are as strong as possible. Maybe that means pausing some customer acquisition spending to improve the CAC to LTV ratio. Maybe it means implementing new features that improve retention from 85% to 92%. Maybe it means documenting the total addressable market size by researching how many artisan businesses exist globally and what they currently spend on software. Each of these improvements in metrics directly translates to better terms and higher valuation when fundraising. The pitch narrative is about telling a story that's bigger than the current product. Zuckerberg wouldn't pitch "we built a customer service AI for artisans." He'd pitch "we're building the operating system for the creator economies, makers, and customer service is just the entry point." This framing completely changes how investors think about the opportunity. Instead of seeing a niche SaaS tool with limited upside, they see a platform play with the potential to capture value across multiple product lines and revenue streams. The narrative would include a clear vision of the next 3 products to launch: an inventory and order management system for artisans, a marketing automation tool designed for handmade goods, and an analytics dashboard that helps artisans understand their business performance. Each of these products would integrate with the customer service AI and with each other, creating an ecosystem that's increasingly hard to leave. The investor target list would be very specific. Zuckerberg wouldn't just approach any VC with money, he'd target investors who have experience with marketplace businesses, B2B SaaS, and the creator economy. More importantly, he'd target investors who are known for being founder-friendly and taking long-term views. In Facebook's early days, Zuckerberg famously turned down acquisition offers and investment offers that would have made him wealthy immediately because he believed in the long-term vision. He'd take the same approach in 2026. He'd rather raise less money at a lower valuation from the right investor than raise more money from the wrong investor. The right investor provides strategic value beyond capital: introductions to potential customers, advice on scaling operations, connections to key hires, and support during difficult decisions. Step 14 would be the actual fundraising process, and Zuckerberg would approach it completely differently than most entrepreneurs. He wouldn't send out a pitch deck to 50 investors hoping someone bites. Instead, he'd leverage his existing network and customers to get warm introductions to his top 5 target investors. Then he'd approach each conversation not as someone looking for money but as someone evaluating potential partners. This shift in frame is critical. When you're desperate for funding, investors can sense it and terms suffer. When you're evaluating whether an investor is the right partner for your vision, the power dynamic is balanced. Zuckerberg has talked about this in interviews. Even when Facebook was relatively small, he approached investor conversations as partnerships, not supplications. In each investor meeting, Zuckerberg wouldn't start with the pitch deck. He'd start with a demo, showing the actual product solving actual customer problems with actual data. This demonstration approach is much more powerful than slides. Investors see hundreds of pitches, but they rarely see working products with real traction. After the demo, he'd walk through the metrics, focusing on the ones that tell the story of product market fit and scalability: customer retention rates, month-over-month growth, customer testimonials, lifetime value calculations. Then and only then would he talk about the vision and the funding request. The ask would be specific: raise $1 million at a $5 million pre-money valuation. This values the company at $6 million post-money and gives away roughly 17% equity. The use of funds would be clear: $300,000 for product development to build the next 2 products in the platform, $400,000 for customer acquisition and marketing, $200,000 for key hires, $100,000 for operations and legal. The terms Zuckerberg would negotiate for would include several non-standard provisions that protect his control and vision. First, he'd negotiate for dual-class shares, where his shares have more voting power than investor shares. This is how he maintained control of Facebook even as ownership diluted through multiple funding rounds and the IPO. Many investors push back on dual-class structures, but for the right deal with strong traction, it's negotiable. Second, he'd negotiate for protective provisions that prevent investors from forcing an acquisition or changing the strategic direction without his approval. Third, he'd negotiate for a board structure that ensures he maintains control, probably a 5-person board with 2 seats for him and his co-founders if he has any, 2 seats for investors and 1 independent seat that both parties agree on. Let's say the fundraising process takes 2 months and results in securing $1 million from a top-tier early-stage VC who specializes in B2B SaaS and has experience with marketplace dynamics. This capital completely changes what's possible. Step 15 would be deploying this capital strategically over the next 12 months. The key word is strategically. Zuckerberg has talked about how Facebook was disciplined with capital even after raising funding. They didn't just spend to spend. Every dollar deployed had to have a clear ROI or strategic value. The deployment would happen in phases, with each phase unlocking the next. Phase 1 of capital deployment would be product expansion. Using $300,000 of the $1 million, Zuckerberg would hire 2 additional engineers, bringing the technical team to 3, including himself. This team would spend 4 months building the second product, an integrated inventory and order management system designed specifically for artisan businesses. This product wouldn't compete with Shopify or Etsy, it would integrate with them. The insight is that artisans often sell across multiple channels: their own Shopify store, Etsy, craft fairs, Instagram shops, wholesale to retailers. Managing inventory across all these channels is a nightmare. They oversell items that are sold out, they forget to update quantities, they lose track of custom orders. The integrated system Zuckerberg would build would sync inventory across all channels automatically, flag when custom orders need attention, and provide a unified view of all orders regardless of where they came from. Because this system integrates with a customer service AI already in use, it can automatically update customers when their orders ship, when custom pieces are ready, when items are back in stock. This integration between products creates massive value and massive switching costs. Phase 2 would be customer acquisition at scale. With $400,000 allocated to this, Zuckerberg would finally invest in paid advertising, but not in the way most companies do it. He wouldn't just throw money at Facebook ads or Google ads hoping for results. Instead, he'd use a test and iterate approach. Start with $10,000 spread across 5 different channels: Facebook ads targeting artisan communities, Instagram ads with creative showcasing real customer stories, YouTube ads on channels about starting craft businesses, LinkedIn ads targeting craft business coaches and consultants, and sponsored content in newsletters for Etsy sellers. Each channel would get $2,000 and 1 month to prove itself. The metric wouldn't be just cost per acquisition, it would be cost per qualified acquisition of a customer who matches the ideal customer profile based on retention data. After 1 month, double down on the 1 or 2 channels that worked, cut the others, and iterate on the creative and targeting. This test and learn approach is fundamental to how Facebook built its own advertising business. They tested everything, killed what didn't work fast, and scaled what did work aggressively. Phase 3 would be strategic hires that multiply Zuckerberg's effectiveness. $200,000 for hiring would bring in 3 key people. First, a head of customer success who takes over all customer onboarding support and relationship management. This person doesn't just solve problems, they proactively ensure customers are getting value and expanding their usage. Second, a content and community manager who takes over the video series, manages the social media presence, engages in artisan communities, and builds relationships with influencers and partners. Third, a data analyst who builds dashboards, tracks all key metrics, runs experiments on pricing and features, and provides the insights needed to make better decisions. These 3 hires, combined with the operations person hired earlier, Create a team of 5, including Zuckerberg. This is the right size for this stage. Small enough that everyone knows everything that's happening. Large enough that Zuckerberg can focus on the highest leverage activities, product strategy, major partnerships, and vision. By month 18, 12 months after raising the $1 million round, the impact would be dramatic. The customer base would have grown from 200 customers to over 1,000 customers. Why? Because the combination of paid acquisition, better content, word of mouth, and having 2 products instead of 1 creates compounding effects. Some customers sign up for just the customer service AI at $99 per month. Others sign up for both products at a bundled price of $169 per month. The weighted average revenue per customer is around $120 per month, and with 1,000 customers that's $120,000 per month or $1.44 million in annual recurring revenue. The business has grown almost 5 times in 12 months. Step 16 would be about crossing the chasm from early adopters to mainstream market. Up to this point, the customers have mostly been innovators and early adopters, artisans who are comfortable with technology and excited to try new tools. But to get from 1,000 customers to 10,000 customers, Zuckerberg would need to reach the early majority. Artisans who are more skeptical, less tech-savvy, and need more proof before adopting new tools. This transition is where many startups fail. The tactics that work for early adopters don't work for the early majority. Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm framework would be highly relevant here, and Zuckerberg would have read it or absorbed its principles through his experience at Facebook. The key to crossing the chasm is focusing on a specific use case and becoming the obvious, dominant solution for that use case. Zuckerberg would pick one type of artisan business and one specific problem to own completely, based on his customer data. Let's say jewelry makers represent 30% of his customer base and have the highest satisfaction scores. He'd make jewelry makers the focus. Every piece of content would feature jewelry makers. Every case study would be about jewelry businesses. Every feature would be designed with jewelry makers in mind first. The product positioning would shift from operating system for artisan businesses to the complete business platform for jewelry makers. This specificity makes the value proposition crystal clear to jewelry makers and makes the product easier to sell. A jewelry maker sees the marketing and immediately thinks, this is for me, rather than this might work for my business. This focused approach would extend to partnerships. Zuckerberg would partner with jewelry-specific platforms and communities. Websites like Ganexin, newsletters like Halstead's Jewelry Business Newsletter, trade shows like the JCK Jewelry Show, and associations like the American Jewelry Design Council. He'd sponsor their events, provide free workshops to their members, and offer special pricing for their communities. Each partnership gives him credibility with jewelry makers and access to exactly the audience he is trying to reach. Within 6 months of this focused approach, jewelry makers would represent 60 to 70% of the customer base instead of 30%. The product would be known as the Jewelry Maker Platform, even though it technically works for all artisans. This specialization paradoxically makes future expansion easier because once you dominate one niche, expanding to adjacent niches is credible. Facebook was the college social network before it became the social network for everyone. Step 17 would be building the team culture and operational systems needed to scale from 10 people to 50 people over the next year. Culture matters more at this stage than most founders realize. Zuckerberg has talked extensively about how Facebook's culture, the posters on the walls saying things like move fast and break things and done is better than perfect, shaped how the company operated and made decisions. These weren't just slogans, they were principles that guided behavior when Zuckerberg wasn't in the room. In 2026, building his artisan business platform, he'd be equally intentional about culture from day one of having a team. The core values he'd establish would reflect lessons from Facebook's successes and failures. First value, ruthless prioritization. The team only works on things that directly impact customer value or company growth. Everything else is noise. This prevents the feature bloat and distraction that kills many growing companies. Second value, customer obsession. Every person on the team, regardless of role, spends time talking to customers every week. Engineers join customer calls. The marketing person does customer support tickets. Zuckerberg himself still onboards major customers personally. This keeps everyone connected to the real problems being solved. Third value, transparent metrics. Everyone on the team has access to all key business metrics. Revenue, churn, growth rate, customer satisfaction. No secrets, no hiding bad news. This transparency creates accountability and helps everyone make better decisions. Fourth value, bias toward action. When there's a decision between planning more and testing quickly, test quickly. This is the move fast principle adapted for a more mature company that needs to avoid breaking critical customer-facing systems. These values would be reinforced through rituals and systems. A weekly all-hands meeting where key metrics are shared and wins are celebrated. A monthly customer storytelling session where someone from the team presents a deep dive on a specific customer, their business, their challenges, how they use the product, what value they get. A quarterly strategy session where the team debates the roadmap and priorities for the next quarter. These rituals create alignment and keep everyone moving in the same direction even as the team grows. Operational systems would include clear documentation of all key processes, how to onboard a new customer, how to handle a customer who's thinking about churning, how to prioritize feature requests, how to deploy code without breaking things, how to create content, how to evaluate partnership opportunities. Each of these processes would be documented in a central wiki that everyone can access and edit. This documentation serves two purposes. First, it makes the company less dependent on any single person, including Zuckerberg. If the head of customer success leaves, the next person can read the documentation and ramp up quickly. Second, it forces clarity of thinking. Writing down how something should be done reveals gaps and inefficiencies that were obvious when the process was just in someone's head. Step 18 would be expanding the product platform to become genuinely indispensable at this point, with strong traction in the jewelry maker niche and a team of 10 to 15 people. Zuckerberg would launch the third major product, a marketing automation and analytics system designed specifically for jewelry makers. This product would help jewelry makers understand which products are selling best, which marketing channels are driving sales, what content resonates with their audience, and how to optimize their pricing. But more importantly, it would integrate deeply with the customer service AI and the inventory management system to provide insights that would not be possible without that integration. For example, the system could identify that customers who ask about custom engraving end up spending 40% more on average, which suggests the jewelry maker should feature custom engraving more prominently in their marketing. Or it could identify that customers who buy a particular style of ring frequently come back to buy matching earrings within 3 months, which suggests an opportunity for a targeted email campaign. These insights are only possible because of the integrated data across customer service, orders, and inventory. This third product would complete the platform. A jewelry maker using all three products would have their entire business running through Zuckerberg's software, customer interactions, order management, inventory tracking, and marketing analytics. The monthly price for all three products bundled would be $249. Some customers would still use just one or two products, but the trend would be toward full platform adoption. By month 30, 2.5 years in, the customer base would be at 3,000 jewelry makers with an average revenue per customer of $180 per month. That's $540,000 per month or $6.5 million in annual recurring revenue. Step 19 would be the inflection point where Zuckerberg makes another critical decision. Does he expand to other artisan categories or does he go deeper with jewelry makers? Both options have merit. Expanding to other categories, ceramics, woodworking, textiles, increases the total addressable market and creates more growth potential. Going deeper with jewelry makers by adding more products and services, maybe lending services, maybe payment processing, maybe wholesale management, increases revenue per customer and strengthens the moat. Zuckerberg has always been a fan of the platform approach, building horizontal services that work across categories rather than vertical solutions for one category. But he's also been ruthless about timing. Facebook didn't try to be a platform for all websites until it had dominated social networking. It didn't launch Instagram until mobile photography was clearly the next big thing. It didn't launch WhatsApp until messaging apps were already proven. In 2026, the decision would come down to data. What do the metrics say? If retention is extremely high among jewelry makers who use the full platform, if expansion revenue from existing customers is growing faster than new customer acquisition, if jewelry makers are asking for more products and services, then going deeper makes sense. Build out the full stack for jewelry businesses and become the absolute dominant player in that one category before expanding. If, on the other hand, customers are happy but not asking for more features, if the jewelry maker market is starting to feel saturated, if there's clear demand from other artisan categories, then expansion makes sense. Based on Zuckerberg's pattern, he'd likely go deep first, dominate jewelry makers completely, then expand to the next adjacent category. Probably something like metalworking or custom accessories that share similar characteristics with jewelry. Going deep would mean launching products 4, 5, and 6 over the next 12 months. Product 4, a wholesale management system that helps jewelry makers manage relationships with retail partners, track wholesale orders, manage wholesale pricing, and handle wholesale inventory separately from direct-to-consumer inventory. Product 5, a financing and cash flow management tool that helps jewelry makers who need to purchase materials for custom orders before getting paid. Product 6, a community and education platform where jewelry makers can learn from each other, share techniques, get feedback on designs, and build relationships. Each of these products serves a real need in the jewelry making business, and each one increases the switching cost of leaving the platform. Step 20 would be preparing for a Series A funding round to fuel the next phase of growth. At 6.5 million in ARR with strong growth, high retention, and a clear expansion path, the company would be attractive to growth stage venture capital firms. The Series A would be much larger than the seed round, probably $5 to $10 million at a valuation of $30 to $50 million. This might sound like a huge jump from the $6 million post-money valuation in the seed round, but in the world of high-growth SaaS businesses, tripling or quintupling revenue in 2 years justifies significant valuation increases. The Series A would be used to expand the team from 15 people to 50 people, to build out a real sales team that can handle enterprise jewelry businesses, and to begin the expansion into adjacent artisan categories. The Series A fundraising process would be similar to the seed round, but at larger scale. Zuckerberg would target top-tier B2B SaaS investors who have experience taking companies from 10 million to 100 million in revenue. Firms like Bessemer, Battery Ventures, or Insight Partners. He'd defocus on investors who understand platform businesses and have a track record of supporting founder-led companies through hypergrowth. The pitch would be less about proving the model works, that's already proven, and more about showing the path to becoming a $100 million revenue business. The narrative would be, we've become the dominant platform for jewelry makers. Now we're expanding to all artisan businesses, and then to all creator economy businesses. This is the same narrative arc that Facebook followed. Dominate one network, expand to more networks, become the social infrastructure of the internet. With Series A capital secured, Step 21 would be scaling the go-to-market motion. Up to this point, growth has been mostly inbound, content marketing, word of mouth, community partnerships. These channels can get you to 10 million in revenue but struggle beyond that. To get to 50 or 100 million in revenue requires outbound sales, particularly for larger customers. A jewelry business making $5,000 a month in revenue is happy to sign up for a $249 per month platform through a self-service process. But a jewelry business making $50,000 a month in revenue wants to talk to a salesperson, wants custom onboarding, wants dedicated support. These larger customers represent much more revenue and have better retention, but they require a different sales approach. Zuckerberg would build an outbound sales team of 5 account executives, each focused on landing and expanding larger jewelry businesses. These AEs would be compensated heavily on commission, creating alignment between their incentives and company revenue. They'd be supported by 2 sales development reps who handle lead qualification and initial outreach, 1 sales engineer who handles technical questions and custom integration requests, and 1 sales operations person who manages the CRM, tracks metrics, and optimizes the sales process. This team of 9 people, combined with the existing inbound marketing motion, would create a dual-engine growth model. Smaller customers come in through service, larger customers through outbound sales, and the combination drives faster overall growth. The outbound sales process would be highly targeted. Using data tools, the team would identify jewelry businesses that have reached a certain scale based on Instagram followers, Etsy reviews, website traffic, or other proxy metrics. These businesses are the ideal customers because they're large enough to afford the platform, sophisticated enough to appreciate its value, and frustrated enough with their current patchwork of tools to be willing to switch. The outreach would be personalized. Each sales development rep would research the target business, understand their specific situation, and craft custom outreach that shows understanding of their challenges. The initial message might reference specific products they sell, complement their craftsmanship, and offer a specific insight about how businesses like theirs are using the platform. This personalized approach has much higher response rates than generic cold emails. Step 22 would be geographic expansion. Up to this point, the business has probably been mostly US focused because that's where Zuckerberg is based and where he started building the community. But artisan businesses exist everywhere. Jewelry makers in the UK, Canada, Australia, Europe, Latin America, Asia. Each market has its own characteristics, its own popular platforms, its own payment preferences, its own language. Expanding internationally requires thoughtful localization, not just translation. Zuckerberg would start with English-speaking markets first, UK, Canada, Australia, because the localization requirements are minimal. The product already works in English. The integrations with platforms like Shopify and Instagram work globally. The main adjustments needed are around payment processing, currency support, and time zone handling. The go-to-market approach for each new geography would follow a similar pattern to the US launch. Identify key communities and influencers in that market, build relationships, offer value through content and education, and let word of mouth drive initial growth. But instead of doing this himself, Zuckerberg would hire local advocates, people who are already respected in the artisan communities in their countries and can represent the brand authentically. This is similar to how Facebook expanded internationally. They didn't just translate the site and hope people would use it. They recruited local ambassadors, understood local culture, and adapted the product where necessary. In some countries, this might mean integrating with local e-commerce platforms. In others, it might mean supporting local payment methods. Each adaptation makes the product more valuable in that market. By year 4, with international expansion underway and the sales team ramping up, the business could realistically be at 20 to 30 million in annual recurring revenue. The team would have grown to 40 or 50 people. The customer base would be around 10,000 jewelry makers, plus maybe another 5,000 artisans in adjacent categories, and the platform would have evolved into a comprehensive business operating system for maker businesses. At this scale, Zuckerberg would face questions about exit strategy. Should he take the company public? Should he sell to a strategic acquirer? Should he continue building independently? Based on his history with Facebook, the answer would almost certainly be to continue building independently with an eye toward eventual IPO. He's never been interested in quick exits. He's always been interested in building large, independent companies that define categories. Step 23 would be thinking about moats and defensibility at scale. At 20 million in revenue, the business is large enough to attract serious competition. Larger software companies might build competing products. New startups might target the same market with similar approaches. How do you defend against this? Zuckerberg's answer has always been network effects and data advantages. In Facebook's case, the network effect was obvious. The more friends you had on Facebook, the more valuable it was, which made more people join, which made it more valuable for everyone. For a B2B SaaS platform serving jewelry makers, network effects are less obvious but still possible. The key would be creating peer-to-peer value, ways that jewelry makers benefit from other jewelry makers being on the platform. This could take several forms. A marketplace where jewelry makers can sell to each other. Maybe one jeweler needs a specific type of clasp that another jeweler makes. A directory where jewelry makers can refer customers to each other for techniques they don't specialize in. A best practices library where successful jewelry makers share their strategies and templates with the community. A collaboration feature where jewelry makers can work together on large custom orders. Each of these features makes the platform more valuable as more jewelry makers join, creating a true network effect. The data advantage comes from having historical data on millions of customer interactions, thousands of businesses, and years of transaction history. This data makes the AI smarter, the recommendations better, and the insights more valuable. A competitor starting from zero can't replicate this data advantage, but the strongest moat of all would be brand and trust. By year 4, if Zuckerberg has executed well, his company would be synonymous with jewelry business software. When jewelry makers think about business tools, they think about his platform first. This brand advantage, built through years of content, community engagement, and customer success, is incredibly hard for competitors to overcome. Facebook became synonymous with social networking to the point where people would say "I'll Facebook you" as a verb. The same could happen in the jewelry business space. Jewelers might say "it's" in my company name system or check company name for my inventory. This linguistic capture is the ultimate moat. Step 24 would be about maintaining velocity and innovation as the company scales. One of the challenges Zuckerberg faced at Facebook was that as the company grew, it became harder to move fast and take risks. More processes, more stakeholders, more concerns about breaking things. He addressed this through organizational structure, creating small autonomous teams that could move quickly, and through culture. constantly reinforcing the importance of speed and experimentation even as the company matured. In year 4 of building the Artisan business platform, with 50 people on the team, Zuckerberg would implement similar structures. The product team would be organized into small squads, each responsible for a specific product or feature area. Each squad would have autonomy to make decisions, run experiments, and ship features without needing approval from multiple layers of management. He'd also implement regular hackathons where the entire company spends 2 days building whatever they want, whether it's related to their day job or not. Some of Facebook's most important features came from hackathons. The like button, video, chat. Hackathons serve multiple purposes. They generate innovative ideas that wouldn't come from the normal planning process. They keep engineering talent engaged and excited. They reinforce the cultural value of building and experimentation. In a 2026 Artisan business platform company, hackathons might produce ideas like a feature that helps jewelry makers design custom packaging, or a tool that auto-generates product descriptions from photos, or an integration with TikTok Shop. Not all hackathon ideas ship, but the ones that resonate with customers and align with strategy can move into production quickly. Step 25 would be preparing for the long game beyond $100 million in revenue. At this point, we're far beyond the original goal of $100,000, but this is where Zuckerberg's thinking becomes most interesting. He's never been satisfied with building a successful business. He wants to build something that matters, something that changes how people live and work. For Facebook, that meant connecting the world and giving everyone a voice. For an Artisan business platform in 2026, that could mean democratizing entrepreneurship for creative people, making it possible for anyone with craft skills to build a sustainable business regardless of their business acumen or technical skills. This mission would guide decisions about product development, pricing, and partnerships. Should the platform always have a free tier so aspiring jewelry makers can get started even if they can't afford $249 per month? Probably yes, because it aligns with the mission. Should the company partner with craft schools and education programs to help students transition from learning to earning? Absolutely, because it expands the market and supports the mission. Should the company invest in content and education that helps jewelry makers improve their craft, not just their business operations? Yes, because it strengthens the community and reinforces that the company cares about makers as whole people, not just as customers. This mission-driven approach creates several advantages. It attracts talent who want to work on something meaningful, not just collect a paycheck. It creates customer loyalty that goes beyond product features and price. It provides a North Star for decision-making when options are ambiguous. It makes the company more resilient during difficult times because the mission gives people a reason to persevere. Zuckerberg has talked about this extensively in the context of Facebook. The mission to connect the world sustained the company through multiple existential challenges: the transition to mobile, the rise of competitors like Snapchat, privacy controversies, regulatory pressure. A clear mission makes it easier to make hard choices because you can always ask, does this serve the mission or not? Step 26, the final step in this framework, would be about legacy and long-term thinking. What does success look like in 10 years? In 20 years? For Zuckerberg with Facebook, success was measured not just in users or revenue but in impact. Did Facebook change how people communicate and share information? Yes. Did it give voice to people who didn't have one before? Yes. Did it create economic opportunities for millions of small businesses? Yes. These impact metrics matter more to Zuckerberg than financial metrics, though the financial success has been extraordinary. For an Artisan business platform in 2026, the 10-year vision might be that millions of creative people around the world are able to support themselves, doing what they love because the platform handles all the business complexity. The 20-year vision might be that the distinction between hobbyist and professional artisan disappears because the barrier to monetizing craft skills is so low. These visions guide strategic decisions in the present. Throughout this entire journey from $0 to $100,000 and beyond, several themes would be consistent. First, an obsession with understanding users at a deep, behavioral level. Second, a focus on building products that create genuine value and solve real problems. Third, a commitment to long-term thinking over short-term gains. Fourth, a willingness to be patient with growth while being aggressive with learning. Fifth, an emphasis on building strong culture and systems that scale. Sixth, a focus on creating moats through data, network effects, and brand rather than just features. Seventh, a mission-driven approach that attracts talent, customers, and partners who care about more than money. Eighth, a bias toward action and experimentation rather than planning and theorizing. But perhaps the most important principle of all is one that Zuckerberg has demonstrated repeatedly throughout his career: the willingness to make bold bets and stick with them even when others doubt. When he turned down a $1 billion acquisition offer from Yahoo in 2006, many people thought he was crazy. Facebook was only 2 years old. $1 billion was an enormous sum, but Zuckerberg believed Facebook could be worth much more, and he was right. When he spent $1 billion to acquire Instagram in 2012, many people thought he was crazy. Instagram had 13 employees and no revenue, but Zuckerberg saw where mobile photography was going, and he was right. When he spent $19 billion to acquire WhatsApp in 2014, many people thought he was crazy, but Zuckerberg understood the value of owning messaging infrastructure, and he was right. When he committed tens of billions of dollars to building the metaverse starting in 2021, many people thought he was crazy.